Hello and welcome back to my channel. I wanted to make a quilt as you go Christmas stocking that would be easy and fast and beautiful. Here are the fabrics that I pulled from my bins to use with this project. I have a couple of navy blue pieces, and I love navy blue with Christmas colors, and the stockings that we already have are navy blue. I have some reds here, some you'll recognize from other projects that I've done recently. I absolutely love this candy cane material. And then moving on to the green fabrics that I had enough of a stash of. I don't think I'm going to use the lighter color greens that I have here. I will pull those out, but they are an option if you have that color. And then at the top, there is a length of white fabric that I am going to use for the lining. Here is a picture from last Christmas with our stockings up, hung on the mantle. But as our family grows, we need more stockings. And so we just recently had a grandbaby added to our family. And so the stocking that I make will be for him. They don't all match, and I'm okay with that, but you can certainly make enough to match for your whole family if you'd like to. This is the pattern that I drew tracing around our current stockings. So the stockings that we currently have are approximately 16.5 inches long, allowing for a 1/2 inch seam allowance. 9.25 inches down at the bottom of the stocking. 12.5 inches from the top to the curve. 4 inches from the curve to the toe. And the toe is 6.5 inches in width and 9 inches width. If you do a search on your computer or phone for a free template for a stocking, a Christmas stocking, there are free patterns that you can get and copy off. Here I have a batting remnant that's just the right size to use for this. Pin the pattern to the batting piece and cut it out with regular hand scissors. I decided to cut the lining and the second batting piece I needed all together at the same time. And since I am using a fabric that has no right or wrong side, I can do this and be okay in the direction of it. And for the second piece of batting that I'll need, I found another remnant, and as I laid my pattern down on it, it was short by just the smallest amount. So I found a scrap piece that I could use, and I just sewed it onto the area that needed just the 1/2 inch of additional length. You can sew scraps of batting together using a zigzag stitch, which I do quite often, and it works out just fantastic. So now I'm just pinning the pattern to the batting and the lining, and then I will cut out those pieces. I thought that I would have more than enough fabric to make the cuff from the lining, but now I'm not so sure. This piece of fabric is all that I had left, and it's not quite as wide as I want it to be. So I may need to use some other white fabric that I have on hand to use for the cuff, or I may go with an off-white or a beige material. I haven't fully decided yet. So here are the two lining pieces cut out, and I am just going to sew these together using a 1/2-inch seam. You would probably want to use just a 1/4-inch seam. I don't know why I put a 1/2-inch seam allowance on the pattern, but so I am just leaving the top open and going all the way around, securing at the top or the beginning and at the end. Securing the stitches, that is, as in back stitching at the beginning and the end. And here it is done. No need to flip it right side out. Now I'm just kind of randomly cutting strips out of the fabric choices that I have. Some are 2 inches, some are 3 inches, some are 2.5 inches. This is just going to look very eclectic and patchworky. I even have one piece of fabric here that I wanted to use that was not very wide, and so I cut it in half, and I'm sewing the two pieces together to get the width that I want. And that is totally okay to do with patchwork things. You take a look at any old home quilt, and I guarantee you, you will find more than one patch or square that was sewn together from two different scraps of the same material. So I've been cutting blue and green strips, and then I move on to cutting red fabric into strips. After I cut the strips out, then I took them to the ironing board and gave them a press or a good iron. I lay the strips all out on the batting, and I start sewing the strips in the middle first. So I put the blue strip down, and then the next strip is the red candy cane, and I put that on top. However, I want you to watch closely because I made a mistake. It was not a huge unfixable one, but a mistake nevertheless. Just be careful when you're laying the strips out and sewing them that you have the strip on top up enough so that when you fold it back over, you're not going to see any batting. I then pin these strips together onto the batting and then take it to the sewing machine and sew them. Sew a 1/4-inch seam on the right side. And I put my walking foot on for the quilting part of this and the regular sewing as well because there were a lot of layers of fabric. So I think that this can still be saved without picking it out because we will have a 1/2-inch seam as we're sewing the two stocking pieces together. But I am careful with this next one to move it up enough so that when it's folded over, there won't be any batting exposed. And I continue sewing the strips on until the batting is completely covered. Now you're probably wondering why I am sewing this directly onto batting and don't have a backing piece onto the batting. And I probably should have cut out some backing for it. Remember, we have the lining that we're going to put in there, and there are just going to be a lot of layers of fabric to sew through at the end. And I got a little lazy. Plus, I thought for a piece that's not going to be washed every week, that it will be just fine just having it sewn onto the batting. So you can add a backing to the batting if you'd like. This is the second piece of batting, and once I have sewn on all of the strips, then I trim around the edges of the stocking to clean it up. Be sure when you're sewing the strips onto the batting pieces that you have a left and a right stocking, so that when you face them right sides together, you will have a front and a back. And here's what the stitching on the back looks like. I'm auditioning a few fabrics for the cuff. Leave a comment below which fabric you would have chosen. I have this off-white navy blue stripe. This is the plain white cuff, and I know I have some plain white material somewhere that I could use for that. The red snowflake material or fabric. And this is a softer white with the print on top of it. I chose to go with the last fabric. I cut the fabric 8 inches. To determine how wide you need to make it, you'll need to measure both stocking pieces at the top. So if your 2 stocking pieces add up to be 18 inches with the seam allowance, then you will need to cut your piece 18 inches also. I also need a piece of fabric to make the stocking hanger. So I chose this piece of green fabric for that. And to make the hanger, I am just going to fold each edge into the middle and then fold that in half, like that. And I'll take that to the iron and press it down, and then stitch it close to the seam on the sewing machine. Seven by 2.5. Right now I am sewing the 2 ends of the cuff together, right sides together, and then I will fold it in half to make the cuff. I'm pinning the two stocking pieces together now, right sides together, and then I will sew a 1/2 inch seam all the way around, leaving the top part open. I also needed to sew that hanger piece down, and so I'm doing that very quickly here now. Finally, sewing the stocking together now. I pulled the stocking right side out to be able to check for any mistakes and make sure that that one part that I had with that strip that didn't cover the batting completely was covered and within the seam. And it was. And there it is. Then I turn it back wrong side out and trim closely around the curved parts so that it will lay flat when it's turned right side out again. And then I go ahead and trim around the curves on the lining pieces that have been sewn. Now I'm putting the lining piece, wrong sides together, into the stocking and smoothing it out, making sure it fits. I line the seams up together and then pin them. Next, I add the hanger, fold it over, and pin it to the side that the heel is on. Next, I am going to add the cuff that has been folded over, wrong sides together, but I am going to put it upside down into the stocking and match up the seams with the stocking, or the one seam with the stocking. I either messed up on measuring the cuff or sewing the stocking, but the cuff is too big for the stocking. So I'll need to take that back to the sewing machine and sew it in a little bit. And you'll see that I end up having to sew it twice before I get it right. This time the cuff was actually too small for the stocking, but I'm going to pin it and make it work as it is. So I'm fitting the cuff with the raw edges pointing up and the seam on top of the hanger, and just smoothing everything down with the lining and the stocking and the hanger and the cuff. I'm cutting off the excess fabric close to the seam. Then I will refold and then pin it back into place the way I had it, making sure that the seams align with one another. So pinning everything together again, and I'm going to have to do some stretching and some easing of fabric to get this to work. And then after it's all pinned, I'll take it to the sewing machine and sew about 1/4 of an inch seam all the way around the top of the stocking. And here we go. I'm taking my time and going slow with this. And voila! So here we have the QAYG Christmas stocking. I chose to make mine more rustic. If you wanted to match up the strips with the front and the back, you certainly could do that. Thank you so much for watching. And if you liked this video, please give it a big thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Goodbye.